All right, everybody, welcome. We'll let you filter into the room. And as you're coming in, I would like it would you mind introducing yourself in chat? Why don't you give us three things? First, your name. Second, your company. And then third, you could also do where you are in the world if you prefer. And then third would be is what you're hoping to get out of the webinar today. So we'll let you filter in. We're going to give it a minute. Again, please, everybody, as you're filtering in, I don't know if you can all hear me. Give us a quick intro in chat. What's your name? Where are you in the world? And what do you want to get out of the webinar today? Hey, Lisa Smith.
Hi.
Lisa got us rolling. Lori, great to see you from Nashville, Tennessee. Improving an already great. I love your company culture. You've talked about that.
Renewal by Anderson, welcome.
All right. Warren Harper from New Jersey. Want to learn how to help your employees.
More puzzle people.
Puzzle's hanging out today.
Yeah.
My people are supporting me.
Welcome.
I like it. Donald Bloom from West Lafayette, Indiana. Mona from Canton, Ohio. Thank you. New options. Can you tell us more about those options? Hey, Joanne from Puzzler. Oh, you guys even have that as your culture? I love that.
Puzzlers, yeah.
I love that. All right. Kent from Ames, Iowa. Hey, Kent, my family is from Hamburg. I think that's not far away. I think I have family stories from my grandparents going to Ames, Iowa. All right. So Angie Moran from Avera Health. We saw a lot of people from Avera sign up. All right. Very good. Pierre, South Dakota.
Delisa, where I work in talent acquisition, would like to learn more about the impact of the Great Resignation and the effects on recruitment.
Well, I think we're going to get to that today for sure. All right. Let's get started.
Dan is looking for ideas to share with my clients about staffing.
All right, everybody, I anticipate that we will see more people roll in. But if you haven't, please go do a quick introduction of yourself. Just tell us your name. If you want to tell us your company, that's great. If you want a location, we're fine with that. And then what you're hoping to get. And this consensus is solutions around this Great Resignation. No surprise there. I am Mike Black, and this is a Paige Black webinar. And we are excited today. Well, first, we are here every third Tuesday. And we typically do marketing webinars. And I know you have the question of what the heck is a marketing company talking about the Great Resignation? And I have an answer, but you have to wait 2 minutes to get it. We're excited to be joined by Lisa Smith and Jim Butler. Lisa is Jim Bishop, excuse me. Jim Butler's a friend. I apologize. He may be on the call. Jim Butler, if you're on the call, hi. Jim Bishop, welcome as a presenter. They're our guests, and we're bringing in Jim from Conjunction Leadership and Lisa from Puzzle HR. All right, I want to tell you, let's start with, I walked into a networking meeting with a friend. It was 2 weeks ago. And he's a CPA. He had just gotten back from vacation. He actually spent time on the East Coast in Virginia on the beach and came back relaxed. And the first meeting that he had was his key operations employee resigning. 2 weeks notice. And if you're not a CPA, if you are a CPA, you know this ahead of time that right now is the worst possible time for someone to resign, because right now, I'm sure he's not on this call. I won't say his name because tomorrow is the deadline for a lot of things that they have to do. So he is swamped and he has to replace his key employee at the same time. I looked a couple of weeks ago. She moved to a new position that is not as prestigious, but it's a nonprofit and it brings more meaning. And so that's the theme of what you're going to hear today. All right. As we get started, I have a little data for you. In April, May, and June, almost 4 million every single month of those 3 months, almost 4 million people left their jobs. 55% of the workforce right now anticipate looking for work. What does it mean for your company if 55% of the people there actually, Tina Ramey, hey, great to see you, sorry. What does it mean for your company if 55% of the people leave? I know for us it'd be a crisis, and I can't imagine that scale doesn't help there. May even make it worse. 56% of the reasons, 56% were looking for more flexibility. So there's your tip. If that's all you wanted, you can leave now. I hope you don't. But really, even people in the lowest paid ranking, 56% were looking for flexibility, even if they did not, making under 30,000, which at least here in Colorado, you'd starve on 30,000 unless you lived, I don't know where you'd live to do that. That's your rent. All right. So what's the solution? We sat down with some experts, Jim and Lisa being those experts, And we talked about what are the solutions. And we believe that the first kind of maybe cornerstone of the solutions is a good culture that engages people and provides purpose. And Jim's going to talk about that today. And I'll give him a full introduction in a minute. Second cornerstone is good HR practices. I said processes and I was corrected. It's practice. And I do think that is the right way to think about it, because it is a practice, and practice is something you can improve. And so I like that. I mean, process, I guess you can too, but practice feels right to me. And then finally, if you go to the work to get a good culture, have the engaging culture, you have good HR practices, you ought to communicate that both internally and externally to the world. And that will help with your retention and recruitment. So that's your answer on why we think why a marketing firm should be in on this conversation. We will see if we can earn our rank as we go through. But first, let me share my screen and we will get started with the presentation today. All right, you're gonna have to, my screen didn't share. There it goes. All right, can everybody see me? Let me double check. Give me a quick hi if you can hear me, if my sound is good. And then also if you can see my screen. All right. Carla Taylor says, hi, Jim Bishop. I'm just going to get that in there before it goes. All right. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you being here. We have 71 people on the call today out of the 220 that registered. So we'll take it. Lisa's best was over 100. We did not meet that. I'm counting on you to help us get more people next time. But let's start off with some introductions today and get rolling with our event. All right. My name is Mike Black. I'm the CEO and managing partner of Paige Black. And then you should add janitor to that title, because that really, I do whatever it needs to be done. Let's go backwards here. Didn't load quite right. All right. First, we have Jim Bishop. And Jim is the founder of Conjunction Leadership. You're going to have to forgive me. I'll look down just a little bit. After 2 decades of corporate leadership, Jim founded Conjunction Leadership, where he works with companies of all sizes. And he helps them improve their employee culture. Jim's approach is a blend of science and art, and he emphasizes the value of the whole person, not just how the employee shows up at work. And if you think back on the data that I just gave you around, it's up here and I'm looking down on my table, around the flexibility and the meaning, that whole theme that you're going to hear, that's important. So that's why we have Jim here today. Thank you, Jim, for joining us. We also have Lisa Smith. She's a senior HR consultant with Puzzle HR, and they all call themselves puzzlers. Now we know that. And she has over 20 years of progressive success providing prestigious organizations with strategic human resources solutions. She has broad experience in leadership development, employment law, employee relations, performance management, compensation, team development, many other things, but we're going to go to the end of talent acquisition. And so if you have good retention and acquisition, that's where Lisa can help you. We also have Marilyn Haywood Page. She is Paige Black's Chief Marketing Officer. She's in charge of delivering all the promises that I make to clients, which is always fun.
Easy.
Not always easy. I once said the New York Times. She really had a problem over that. No, she has a master's degree in integrated marketing. I never said New York Times. And she leads up our marketing efforts. And I'll tell you, if you ever have the opportunity to have a conversation with Marilyn, the question you want to ask is, how did you go from jazz singer to marketer? Mm-hmm. Or did you? So there you go. She is a jazz singer. She has sung for some pretty famous people. That's the second question for you. All right, what you're going to learn today, because you said, hey, this is what I want to get out of it. Hopefully this answers you. This is what we've prepared. And if we're not answering your question, please ask it and we'll try and answer it on the fly. But we want to talk about how you can build a resilient culture, how you can prevent turnover. And I think that also would include how you can get new people. And then finally, how communication can support your hiring and retaining of employees. Any questions, people? And pop them in the chat if you do. All right, Jim, I know you are starting off with the idea of building a resilient culture, and I'm a fan of this idea. I think it's really important. And if you look at the trends that are happening, like the data that I suggested, but also there's a ton of data out how people are looking for more meaning in their work. And that's going to be a piece of what you present today. Why don't you get us started?
Sure. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me on this webinar and also this important topic. So a bit of background, in my role, I get to work with a bunch of different organizations and a lot of different leaders. And what I've seen over the last 4 to 5 months or so is a disturbing trend, just where there's a lot of discontent, I'd put it, in their meaning, purpose, where they're at in life, and also what they do for their work. A lot of people were starting to bring up questions about existential things, like, do I fit? Do I matter? Is this where I want to be? Is this where I want to invest my time? And I started wondering about this. So I started doing some research, looking just deeply into what it meant, where it was at, what was going on, because my anecdotal evidence supported that. But I put a post out there on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago and just said, hey, what do you think about this? And I got some really disparate ideas back. And there's some people that said, yes, absolutely, this is me. I also got some people that said this is a hoax and this is a way to sell more services, right? So I just pulled a few clips off of different business articles, thought leaders, provocateurs to come up with what is really going on. And so whether or not you believe it, I think it does help us. It behooves us all to look into it, right? Because maybe we've all been so busy in the midst of trying to survive COVID that we just haven't paid attention. But I think truthfully, if we each asked ourselves deeply, we've probably been asking ourselves those same existential questions. Do I fit? Do I matter? Is this where I want to do with my life, right? So
Jim, really quick, I know, what was the top result on that LinkedIn poll?
Yeah, on the poll specifically, people were saying it was just a matter of existential questions. They were just wondering if they're at the right place in their life where they should be. So I asked multiple things. Is it because the company strategy is wrong? Is it the culture is wrong? Is it the mission is wrong? And most people said it's just where I'm at in my point in time. So.
Right. And so Marilyn just asked a great question, and I'm taking a little of your time. I'll give up some at the end, I promise. I want to know, on the call, people listening, you're here obviously for a reason. So either this isn't just like, you're probably not in the denial stage of the Great Resignation where you're like, it's a hoax. But you may not have personally experienced. You may have talked to somebody that experienced it. But I kind of want you to chime in. Are you personally experiencing this as a company, or is this something you're trying to prevent, or is it just something you've heard about and you're just curious? And I think Mark said yes, he's experienced it. Thank you, Mark. Some, not a high level, 5% says Damon. All of the above, says Jen. I hear that. Angie says she's experiencing it. Elena, thank you. Oh, Jamie. Well, that's a nice endorsement of Puzzle. 18-year career left. And then 90 days with another company, said, I am out, not for me, and has joined Puzzle and is happy. All right. So if you're looking for work and you're in HR, Puzzle's the place to go. I know they're growing too. All right. Very good. Experience and prevention, says Warren Harper. All right. And Jim, I apologize. Let's get you moving forward. Thank you, everybody, for coming in.
Sure.
All right.
So it's interesting, like whether you believe it or not, it does look like here in the poll that we're seeing it in many places. But one of the biggest things is people don't know where to start. And a lot of times, because they're busy, what I've noticed too is that people are starting to behave or just believe that our company strategy is going to pull us through this, that we've got a sound profitability plan. We know how we're going to beat the competition, and we know where we're going in the future. And they'll put that strategy front and center and hope that holds people. But our friend Peter Drucker has reminded us for many years that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So it doesn't matter what your strategy is. What matters is, do your people want to do that? Are they willing to go there with you? And so if we believe that's true, then it behooves us to say, well, why is culture important for this thing called the Great Resignation? So just a few of those top statistics that I looked up as I was pulling things together here. And we can see that 46% of people cite company culture as important when they're applying to a company. So it matters when they're wanting to go somewhere. 47% of active job seekers say they cite company culture as the reason that they're looking for work in the first place, presumably a suboptimal culture or one that doesn't necessarily meet their needs, right? And yet 91% of managers say that a candidate's alignment with the company culture is equal or more important than their skills or experience. And this is where I really started to question, like, how many leaders have actually taken a purposeful look at what their culture is? Or when they're saying that a candidate matches with their company culture, are they just saying this person thinks and acts like the majority of us here, so they would be a good fit? And if so, is that really the type of culture that we need to have in today's rapidly changing environment, right? Or do we just get more of the same? Are we minimizing the opportunity to bring diversity into our organizations because the preponderance of people here think and act similarly, right? So
right, I'm going to pause just for a second, Jim. I'm going to pause you for a quick question because somebody's asked a foundational question. What the heck is the Great Resignation of 2022? I think it's 2021. But if I've misunderstood you, Rena, I apologize. I guess what it is everybody's leaving their job. Like half the workforce is leaving their position They are moving to something that provides more meaning, more pay, more flexibility, more something that they're not getting, more culture. And so that's what we're talking about with this whole presentation. If I've misunderstood your question, please type it again into chat. And then, Tonya, I'm going to rely on you, Lisa, for this, because I think you have the best data for this. I have some thoughts. Does the Great Resignation happen to the management at the management levels instead of just normal employees? There are more challenges to leadership during hybrid mode than to normal employees. I think there are challenges in both. In my experiences, it's everybody.
It's everybody. It's not just management. It's everybody.
Yeah. Well, it's both employees, management. People are starting they're leaving their corporate career and starting businesses. It is just almost, they're calling it also the great reshuffling. All right. Jim, I apologize for taking a minute there. Please continue, but I don't want to ignore questions.
Sure. Absolutely. I appreciate that, Mike. I like the interactivity of it as well. So if you could go ahead to the next slide, that'd be great. I think it behooves us then to start also thinking about what is culture, right? What is this word? So for getting grounded on what is the Great Resignation, what is culture? And quite simply, I just say it's the common language and common belief shared by a group of people. But the Hofstede Insights, their definition is the programming of the human mind by which one group of people distinguishes itself from another group. So we think about that. Families have cultures, teams have cultures, organizations have cultures. Really, any place that is separate from another has a culture. So classically, you might recognize that when you go travel somewhere else. It could be to another state or even more disparately to another country. People just think and act a little different than where you came from, and you can recognize the distinction there, right? But we also then need to be thinking about, where does culture come from? So if you could hit the next slide, Mike. The truth of this whole thing is that your company already has a culture. You may or may not have put intentional thought to it, but it already exists. So if culture is the programming of the human mind to be seen differently than another group of people, you have probably as many cultures in your organization as you do leaders or teams, right? As many disparate things that happen. So you might also then, without definition, these cultures just organically behave or evolve. So what tends to happen is the things that you tolerate or the things that you celebrate become what your cultural norms are. I really look at it in three different levels. There's the optimal culture, what you want it to be. There is the perceived culture, what people recognize it to be. And then there's the actual culture, about what people talk about and how they experience it. You can look at your culture in those three different levels, but I like to use the analogy of a garden. I mean, you can plant your garden and you can till the soil and get it all ready. And you can say, this is what our culture is. But without maintenance, the weeds tend to grow up and crop up in it. There tend to be some less optimal harvests, and your garden doesn't get to evolve with the seasons. And culture is a similar thing. They need to constantly be evolving with adapting to where we're at. And I think this COVID experience has been one where many corporate cultures have shifted, but maybe haven't adapted purposefully. So I had a leader recently come in one of our conversations, and he was really a pretty strong leader to begin with and leading this organization. And they had put a lot of intentional focus on what is our culture. Well, then COVID hit and a lot of stuff happened. And he and his management team started behaving in ways that were maybe not their espoused values, and they were more reactive, and they had kind of taken their focus off of what is our culture, and it devolved into something else. And he came and said, what do I do? I need to get this thing back. So we together came up with several experiences about what are the tips that you could put together that would help you build a more resilient culture.
Whoops, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. So tip number one, I'll just tell people quite blank out, don't start with the brass plaque. And what do I mean by that is, like, a lot of people, when they say we need to start culture, will spend copious amounts of time with lots of people and lots of man hours, pulling them into a room, coming up with what's our mission, vision, values, and then they spend a lot of time trying to wordsmith them. And what they end up with is a lot of benign words that are the least offensive to the largest amount of people. And they put that on a brass plaque and on their signature pages and at the end of their emails. And they hope that everyone believes it just because we're repeating it over and over and over again. But the words aren't really what you're going after right now, because the experience is how people judge culture. So for tip number two, then, go ahead and advance the slide.
Yep, sorry, I was reading a question.
Oh, no problem. So for tip number 2, I would also say then also don't start with buying off your employees. That means a lot of people have, what I've seen happen over time is when they say we don't really have a great culture, what we're going to do is be overly nice to people. And so maybe we're very friendly and very cordial, but a lot of times they add some creature comforts into their workplace. They're adding free food bars or snacks on Thursdays or donuts on Monday, or they're putting on an on-site dry cleaning or childcare services. And while those may be good representatives of what your culture wants to get across, that also immediately just adds other things for your already overburdened management team to have to manage. So I would not use starting with buying off your employees as the first place to go. They just recognize it as you're trying to buy their time.
Hey, Jim, before you move forward, Sean has a really interesting comment I'd love to get your response to. And that is, he argues that COVID is the catalyst that pushed already unstable systems, either inhumane or at the very least misaligned corporate cultures to the point of full disequilibrium. Thank you, Sean, for challenging my ability to read words on the screen. He is biased, he says, but he hopes that organizations without an alignment on purpose will suffer. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I think it's a very intuitive deduction of what has gone on, right? Like that's what, again, the words on the page didn't really matter because a lot of employees may not have believed them in the first place, right? So I think it illustrates point number 1, don't start with the brass plaque. The systems may not have been there to support the underlying belief of this is truly what our culture is. So
that's right. I think the other piece is it gave people time to think. That if you sit back and you're working from home, you have a little bit, you're not commuting, you're not trying to fight traffic, you have time to think and you realize, geez, my life isn't what I want it to be. What do I want my life to look like? So, all right, Carla Taylor says, and then I'll move right back to her presentation. As a futurist, we'd like futurists. Oops, I hit the wrong part there. She sees it for multiple reasons. For years before COVID, and then COVID made a massive, bigger impact. Urgency to make moves that have been coming for years. So you see this has been kind of hiding and ready to happen, and then called the final catalyst to echo that. All right, very good. All right, please continue. I'm sorry.
Yep. So I've given you 2 tips of what not to do. Now I'm going to give you a tip of where to start. I think you start with the human element. You start with what humans want most. And I'm going to say there's 3 principles that you should build a resilient culture off of.
I got you.
Those 3 principles are choice, competence, and connection. And so if we think about our own human experience, right, when you feel most optimally motivated is when you're generally in the majority, feeling like you have the majority of control over your life, when you have the most opportunities to make choices that are in your best interest. When you feel less optimally motivated is probably when more of those choices are getting made for you, or you have taken yourself out of being able to make them for yourself. The second principle around competence is just a human desire. You can think about this, and if you've ever raised children or been around small children, or you've just been an adult in the workplace, but we constantly want to learn something new. Small children demonstrate this by the phrase, me do it. I do it by myself, right? I get to be autonomous in making my choices, but I also am learning to walk, to run, to skip, and to jump. And in the workplace, we hear that all the time when employees say, one of the things I just don't feel like is there's no room to grow anymore, or there's nothing else for me to learn, or the box that I'm currently in is feeling a little too small. Mm-hmm. The third principle that I would say you need in a resilient culture is the principle of connection. And yes, of course, that means on the most basic level, connection with your fellow employees, connections to understand who they are, to empathize, to feel like you're a fit and you're a part of something, but also connection with a mission that's much bigger than yourself. Something that this organization does that you can connect to, that is something that is maybe altruistic, but maybe it's also just something that you believe in passionately, that this is what you want to give your life purpose and work to. And in today's world, I think this is the one that's missing so much because we've gone to this work from home environment where we're virtual. So some of our natural connections are missing, but also some of our physical connections with what is the purpose and the approach of what we're trying to get done, both in my role and at this organization. And if I had to dissect why, I think a lot of leaders, a lot of organizations have just taken their foot off of communicating that because they've been so focused on trying to survive in the midst of all of this, to provide jobs for their employees, to keep things running when it seemed like everything was going to shut down. And by taking their foot off that gas pedal a little bit, it's a little bit they just let the weeds start to grow in the garden just a little bit too much. So I think you can see, like, if you build a culture around these three principles, you're going to have a pretty resilient culture because it creates a more optimally motivating environment for those individuals to want to bring their best self to work. But maybe now people are probably trying to ask the question, how do I get that? How do I do that? So I have a fourth tip for you.
There we go.
And in that fourth tip, I'm going to tell you provocatively, do not invest into your management. Now, I know when I say that, you're probably scratching your head going, but wait, that's completely opposite than what I thought. But I like to draw the distinction between what is management and what is leadership, right? And in this case, management is around running the system the way the system was designed. But to Sean's point earlier, maybe the system was broken long ago and we just are now trying to figure out how to fix it. So management isn't our solution here. Management, by definition, usually involves a lot of telling and supervising and orchestrating and evaluating. But on the other side of it, if we look more into the leadership aspect of it, I think the leadership that we need in today's environment is really much more around a coaching culture, to build one where leaders have strong coaching presence. And what does that mean? Coaching presence is around helping people do what they already are motivated to do, but do it just a little bit better, helping them clarify and find their spot, helping them figure out where to go, but not through the direction of it, but through the asking and pulling out of them what they already know they need to be doing. So if you're going to invest into anything, I would not invest into management training. I would invest into coaching presence, because by coaching, you're getting the choice, competence, and connection of the three principles by natural conversations that occur over time. So in summary, I just think one of the opportunities that I found most rewarding through this experience is to work with those individuals, teams, and organizations and help them figure out not only what do I want to do, but collectively, how can we make the biggest place in the world by disrupting, bridging, and growing in the things that we do most often. To get to that place of growth or to get to that place of new opportunity, we first have to unlearn a lot of stuff that we thought was working in the first place, bridge to what that new opportunity is, and then just be wholeheartedly vulnerable with a whole lot of courage and say we want to grow towards it. So,
all right, very good.
I appreciate the opportunity to share, and I would welcome any questions along the process.
So if you go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to say something. So Marilyn, do you mind going back to the slide where he had the choice, competence, and connection? It's so funny, when I was looking at this slide this time, Sean just brought up Dan Pink, and he's absolutely right. This is Dan Pink work to a T, the autonomy, the mastery, and the purpose. And just a quick story, we saw in the chat, my puzzler friends are on here and they're talking about how much they love working for Puzzle HR. And the people who started this company a few years ago, they had these three things in mind, and I think about that. We have autonomy, we have that flexibility. We are able to create and think about new ways of servicing our clients. We're building something bigger than ourselves. So we have purpose and we're all in it together. And every single day we learn and we're constantly teaching each other. We're helping each other with servicing our clients. We're on chat all day asking questions. Do you know how to service this question? Have you heard of this before? And we're helping each other. So this doesn't happen by accident, and it happens on purpose, but when you're a part of it and you experience it, it just is amazing to go to work. So I just thought I'd share that, since my puzzlers have already shouted out how much they love working for our company.
Yeah.
There you go. So if you don't work at Puzzle HR, you now know where you want to go work, which sounds awesome. All right.
It's a great illustration, Lisa. Thank you for bringing all that into an actual real story from.
All right, I'm just going to do a bit of timekeeping. It's 10:29, so we got to keep rolling if we're going to finish on time. So let's talk about, Lisa, the second stage of what we wanted to talk about is HR practices.
Right. Well, thank you. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is, what's the business case for retention? So, at Puzzle HR, we want to make sure anything we do is going to impact the bottom line, impact the business. So we need to understand, why are we doing this? Why is it important? So a lot of us have probably heard the stat that, turnover is costly and it's about 1.5 times the employee's salary. And the factors that typically go into that number are things like the job posting, the recruiting costs, the interviewing the applications, the cost to train the person, and then the productivity that's lost between when the person quit and when the new person starts, and then the time that it takes the new person to get up to speed. But what I'd like to challenge you to think about is that there's also a lot of hidden costs for turnover. So there's that time between the decision the employee made to quit and actually leaving the organization. So how productive do you think that employee is when they have already mentally quit and they've started looking for another job? It'll probably take them a couple months to find the right position. So that's a big loss to the organization. Also, the cost to the coworkers' engagement. So, from the time that they mentally quit to the time when the new person is trained and up to speed, that puts a lot of stress and strain on their coworkers to pick up the slack. So I recently talked to an employee who she lost her manager, she lost a coworker, she trained the new manager and the coworker while trying to keep everything together. And then the manager quit, and that new manager quit 2 months in. And during all that time, the employee told me, I have not received one call or one thank you from our leadership team on all that I'm doing to keep it all together. And now she's starting to question whether or not she wants to stay. She's starting to think, why am I here? Then there's also that lost knowledge. So think about your own experience. Do you have an experience? Can you think of an experience where you've had a vendor who had a key account manager on your account and that person left? So even if that new person is absolutely fantastic, there's still some downtime for that new person to learn your business. And then history of how things were handled before are lost, and some projects or information could be lost in translation from the former person to the new person. So think about how you felt working with that vendor at that time. Were you a raving fan, or were you more open to talk to a competitor? So let's move on to the next slide of, how do you prevent turnover? So we saw on the chat that there's some of you out there that are not having a hard time or experiencing a lot of turnover, but you want to prevent it, or you're curious. So what do you do there? So first, you have to make sure that you're on a level playing field with all employers. Are you paying fairly? We recently had a Puzzle HR client that was having trouble recruiting and retaining a particular position. And so we recommended a compensation market analysis to ensure that they were paying fairly. And we found that their rate of pay for this hourly position was 20% below market. And that was what was happening. That's why they couldn't keep people. That's why people were leaving. They didn't even have the ticket to get into the game. So once you've determined that you are paying fairly, we work to look at our leaders to help retain those employees. And like what Jim said, we work at coaching those managers, coaching them to learn how to coach their employees. Because, we've all heard the saying, employees join companies and they leave managers. So the manager skills are really critical. Their coaching skills are critical to retention. So one tool that we've used, we've had some success with, is stay interviews. And stay interviews include questions that managers can ask their employees to learn what it would take for that employee to leave the organization. They can ask things like, do you have the right tools to get the job accomplished? And I have a whole list of questions that we use to help coach managers on how to handle this. But a lot of our managers, we find, are really afraid to have these conversations because they think that the employee is going to bring up things that they can't control, or things like more money. And what we do is we coach our managers to tell their employees that we want to focus on what the manager can control, and then collect any feedback on things like pay and escalate that to their leadership team. So an example of where I saw this work really well is we asked an employee, what do you like least about your job? And this particular employee said that it was a dashboard report that she had to do for senior leaders. And the report took her several hours. It was tedious and prone to errors. And she received a report from the IT department with the data. She then manipulated the data in an Excel spreadsheet with lots of formulas. It had, just to match what the executives were requiring. And when we learned this, we thought, well, gosh, why don't we go back to IT and see if we can start there to get better reporting? So it was a simple meeting with the IT department to adjust the data they were pulling from the system that better matched what the executive team were asking for. And then that tedious report went from hours to 30 minutes, and it was a lot easier and less frustrating. So just simple questions can help an employee make their job much more satisfying. All right, so how do we change the tide of turnover? So Puzzle HR often gets hired by employers who are dealing with turnover. And the first thing that we want to look at is data. Data like exit interviews, stay interviews, and employee surveys can give us the information we need to really properly diagnose what's going on and then help the employer put action plans together to then solve for turnover. So after looking at some data for a financial services company, we learned that there was a real issue with an us versus them mentality between the corporate team and the field offices. The field office didn't understand why decisions were coming down from corporate, and then the corporate team didn't understand why the decisions in the field were happening or they weren't following direction. Also, employees didn't feel like that they had opportunities to learn and grow. So we created a program in which we identified high potential and high performing talent in both the field office and the corporate office. And then we had people at similar levels switch jobs for a week. It was an eye-opening experience for both sides. They walked in each other's shoes and they learned the challenges they faced. The decisions that they had questioned in the past made more sense now. They were able to come together and make better processes that work for both the field and the corporate office. And then these high potential employees were also exposed to leadership teams in different parts of the organization, which helped lead them to more career development opportunities. So let me tell you another story. I worked with a company in which the manager came to me and asked for help with his high turnover in his department. And that's a beautiful thing when a manager recognizes that they need help and they ask for it. So we looked at the exit interviews and we heard loud and clear that employees were not feeling appreciated. And I asked him about this. So we started talking, and the manager said that he didn't feel comfortable with giving out praise. He said he grew up in a house in which his father would joke with his mother, "I told you I loved you the day we got married, so why do you need to hear it again?" So we knew this would be uncomfortable and awkward for this IT manager. So we had to put a process in place for him. So every Friday, he blocked out an hour on his calendar. He spent the first 30 minutes writing down things people had done on his team that he appreciated or accomplishments that had been made. And he wrote down different points of things that he wanted to tell that person. Then he spent the next 30 minutes walking around the office, or if you're virtual, calling them on a Zoom call and thanking them for what that employee did with something specific. And within 3 months, it became less uncomfortable for him, and he saw turnover go down. And I have so many other stories that I could tell you all, and how we solve for things like lack of appreciation or career opportunities. But, I really would love the opportunity to talk to you and understand your particular situation. So if you want to give me a call and brainstorm about these things and what's going on, I'd be happy to do that.
All right. And you have the option to message Lisa. If you just go into chat and hit the @ signal, you can message her and give her your email. You can do the same thing with Jim. And everybody, thank you for the patience with slides. And sorry, Lisa, that we kind of had that.
That's okay.
I lost internet for a minute. So then that stopped the sharing. Marilyn quickly behind the scenes started sharing because she has access to the presentation. And so
I'm
she
not
kept
as
us
good
moving
at
forward.
Mike's much better at managing.
Well, that's all right. We're figuring it out. So we'll get started on, okay, now if you have the business culture down, or you have a plan for that, you have the HR practices down, what do you do? How do you communicate that both internally and externally? And I'll go to our first slide, Marilyn, if you're ready.
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, very well. First, I want to talk about our next webinar, and it may change depending on Jim's availability. What we're talking about is potentially doing this webinar again. We've had a really nice response. I don't think the Great Resignation is going away. We may repeat this next month. We may also talk about how you can leverage marketing to hire the right people, which is really, we're going to give you a hint of that today. We'll give you the nuts and bolts of that next month. All right, let's talk about, as business leaders, You feed and clothe the world, and you do that by employing people. You develop products and services that change the world and make it a better place. But business is hard. Hiring people is hard. So as you sit down at your desk every morning, you flip open your computer or turn it on, you are faced with critical decisions. And the result of those decisions will help your company grow. It'll help, maybe it may cause it to shrink, it may cause it to go away. And unfortunately, you're forced to do this on gut feel without data, unless you have some support from people like Lisa who can give you internal data at least. When it comes to marketing, often it is a gut feel decision. So what's the consequence of that? Well, the truth is that gut feel is not bad. We're all alive because somebody had gut feels and they had good, strong gut feelings in situations that involve survival. And those, I'm talking about your grandparents, your great grandparents, and they're up. But as business evolves, data is becoming more critical. And so we want to talk a little bit today about data-driven marketing decisions. We do that in terms of employees, but I also want you to translate, in terms of client acquisition, we're going to translate that today into what that looks like in finding and hiring good employees. So if you get it wrong, what happens? Well, you waste money is one outcome, or you're slow to market because you make the wrong decision and then you try and fail until you succeed. Or worst case scenario, it works. And unfortunately, you bring in the most expensive, the least profitable customers, the most grumpy customers, the most difficult. It starts to impact morale. Maybe they return products or they're difficult on client meetings if you're B2B or B2C. Either way, that's not good. So we're proponents. We believe you should make data-driven marketing decisions. Now, what the heck does that mean? When I say that, you want to go back one, Marilyn?
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. You just tap that keyboard, not practiced. So when I'm talking about data, many people think of clicks. They think of graphs. They think of, Tableau and how does this look? How do we map this data? And that's really good for performance data. That's not really good when you're talking about planning, executing, and really delivering a marketing campaign. And that counts for both employees or for new client acquisition. So what does that mean? What kind of data am I talking about? Well, it starts with identifying your most profitable, best customers or employees. Who are they? And that takes that data that Lisa's talking about. It probably takes a little bit of data that would come out of Jim's work, but it also just takes what we talk about as customer search. Once you do this, you review that data, figure out who your best customers are or your best employees, and you go ask them questions like Lisa's talking about. You figure out what's important to them. In a marketing situation, we take what we understand to be the most important to your potential customers. We look at the competition. What are they not talking about that's important to your customers? That's where great marketing comes from. Then you plan and execute a campaign on that. So we're going to translate a little bit of that from what I've just talked about, a client acquisition. Marilyn's going to take that forward and start to talk about what does that mean for employees.
Well, you're marketing your company to employees, and you're marketing employees to prospective employees. You need to market to both of those potential audiences. Well, one is an audience and the other is a potential audience. But just in the same way that you market your company to clients, you now need to market to employees and prospective employees. And I mean, the ideal situation is people are clamoring to work for you because the word's out. It's a great place to work. And you have your pick of the best employees because the word's out. You're a great place. So how do you become that great place from a marketing perspective? In the ways of communication, marketing communication, how do you make your workplace the sought after place to work? And wow, I better be on my game because I'm keeping this job because there's 20 people wanting to take it from me. So the first thing I tell companies is review your brand signals. If you think that your brand doesn't matter as you are recruiting and retaining your employees, let me ask you this. If your employee was offered a job at Google or Apple or Nike or Coca-Cola, would they run? Those are brands that people want to work for. Those are brands that it's status to say, I work at Google. So if you think your brand doesn't matter, think about how quickly your folks would leave for a better brand.
I have a really good example when it comes to that. If you look at Google just announced that they are looking at location-based pay, meaning they're not going to pay you based on the value of the service you provide. They're looking at your costs and trying the cost of living and saying if you live in a different place, they are able to save money by not paying you as much. Now, right or wrong, that's the choice that they're exploring. And Reddit said, we will not do that. And so that's a difference, is that, do you want to work at Reddit or do you want to work at Google? Well, people clearly, if that's true, if what I've said, one indication of where people want to work is Google, that they're willing to maybe take a pay cut because they live here in Denver and not in San Francisco. Although Denver's going to compete pretty quickly here. So sorry, Marilyn, please continue.
Yeah, but it's the culture of your organization does get broadcast, even if you're not a Google or an Apple or you're always on the news. Your culture still gets broadcast, and the way that it gets broadcast is your logo, your website. Those are the two biggest things that people see readily. So the last time you gave out t-shirts with your logo on them, or mugs, or something personal, ball caps, did your employees rush to get them? Or did they, thanks, super? Do they use them? Do they wear them proudly? That is an indication of, am I proud of this brand? Is this logo really dated? Is it really kind of cheesy? Do I not, I kind of don't really want them to see that. Or are they proudly taking that mug around?
I'm sorry, I have to tell a story. So three years ago, we talked to a potential client, and we looked at their website, and it was really pretty awful. It was one page. It looked like they were a Harley Davidson or a tattoo parlor, Harley Davidson dealership, although they weren't that sophisticated. Looked like they worked out of their garage. When I met with them, turns out 30 employees, they're doing $5 million in a business, working on 10. And so it was shocking, that difference.
The only thing worse than their website was their logo, by the way.
Yes, that's true. So their key employee, their operations manager, was looking at leaving the company. And actually, we redid their logo, brought in our best designer, redid their logo, really built a fantastic logo for them. And the business leader, who was potentially having to hire somebody and replace 30 years of experience, found that person with a hairdryer after hours, with the hairdryer, with decals of their new logo, putting it on the cars, the trucks at their business. And he is still there today. So it really does impact. If you're not, I meet with lots of people and they're like, look, our website's not so hot. I'm sorry, whatever. And they're kind of making excuses because I'm a marketing company. I get it. It's hard to build a good website. But the fact is if they're saying that to me, what are their employees saying about it? So I'm sorry, Marilyn, that's just to the point.
So real quick, because we have some other, I want to move us forward. If people are avoiding using your website, if they are not using it for a resource, if they don't refer their friends and family to it, if they can't refer clients to get the right information, it's time to rethink that website. That's all I'll say about that. All right. So there it is. Okay. On your website, you have hopefully a careers page, and hopefully it is a careers page and not a jobs page. That careers page needs to communicate your culture, what it's like to work for you. What's it look like? What's it feel like? What's it sound like? How will I feel? What will my day be like if I work for you? What are the top questions that those folks who are thinking about working for you, what are the top questions they ask? And the reason I've got the Navy Jets on here is because one of the greatest, the best recruiters in the world is the armed services, and in particular, the Navy. Their marketing is exquisite on their careers pages. And I'm going to just give you some. So the first thing is, well, what would my life be like on a ship? They've got a page for that. So they are answering, what's it like to work for Puzzle HR? What's it like to work for Paige Black? What's it like to work in the Navy? And they have a page for it, and they've built it out. They've got videos, they've got testimonials, they've got Q&A. What's it like? Segment your audiences on your careers page. You've got a DevOps team, you've got an engineering team, you've got finance team, whatever it is. Build out those segments on the careers page so that when I go to that page, I find myself, I see myself. Oh, that's what it would be like for me to work there. That's what you want to create. And it's also saying, you're also subtly saying to them, we get you. Come work here because we get you. And that's very compelling. Videos. I love the Life as a Sailor. They've got a whole slew of videos, women, men, different ages, different nationalities. Terrific video page. FAQs. What are the questions that people ask? And I love this page because what do people ask when they want to go into the Navy? What's the living quarters like? What's the personal care? Do I have to cut my hair? Can I wear makeup? What's my free time? Can I do what am I allowed to do? How much free time do I get? Fitness and sports. What kind of physical things will I need to do in the service? And they have whole sections built out with that. So they've really built not just a jobs page, a careers. It's a whole section. It's not even just a page. It's a whole career section. So that when you go to their website, like you know exactly who this company is and who they're not. And if you want to attract that ideal employee, just like you attract an ideal client, you need to say, this is who we are and this is who we're not. And be clear about it, because you want to attract the people that you want working for you and repel the ones that you don't want to touch. And you don't want to have to screen them. Let your website screen them. Let your website self-select. That would be a great use of your time.
And
All right, we have a couple comments.
Oh,
go ahead.
Oh, thanks. Wouldn't this be also a great place to retain internal employees? You know, if I want to make a jump from the IT department to the finance department or whatever, it helps me understand what is it like to be there.
Yep. Yep.
So Carla says, being proud of where you work and a place you belong creates massive employee loyalty. And I agree with that 100%. So does Mark.
Yeah.
And then Marilyn, just so you folks, I'm gonna have to just do a quick, you have 8 minutes until your next webinar.
Yeah.
So you got to go in 3. So keep going.
I'm doing a webinar in Russia.
Demand, and she actually has a second webinar that they actually are now asking her to lead in 8 minutes. So we'll lose Marilyn in
Plaque.
3.
So the point I want to make is, so I had a client that actually had us build an infographic that outlined exactly how you could progress through the company, what the progression was. You start here, you can go to here, you get this training, you can go to here. And it was an actual infographic that was on the website and that they could send people. You want to know how you can grow your career here? Well, this is how. And it was, something that it wasn't a secret. It was not a secret. And that's what people want to see is, how can my career progress here? And if you can put that on your website, that's beautiful. That's gorgeous. All right. Now, the last thing I want to say, if you haven't heard this before, there's been talk a lot lately, especially because of people questioning the meaning in their job. And the wisdom is, you need to be telling people about the company mission and vision. We need to really hammer in about the mission and vision. True story. A friend of mine runs a successful nonprofit, political nonprofit, and their employees are gung-ho. They are very driven, very motivated. They are so on board with the mission. They are working every day. And one day in a staff meeting, he says, okay, what is our mission? And not one person could say, our mission is. And yet they were mission driven and they were motivated and they were enthusiastic, but they didn't actually know the company mission. So ask your employees, what's the mission? Now, connect the dots means it's not enough to say, okay, guys, here's our mission. We're going to put it on our email signatures. We're going to put it on a plaque, right? You need to connect the mission to what they are doing in context. I'll repeat that. You need to not just say, here's our mission. You need to say, this is our mission, and this is how your job and your role relate to that mission. You have to connect the dots. You cannot assume that they'll get it. Oh, well, our mission is this and my job is this. Don't assume it. You need to connect it for them. You know, when you do those reports that used to take you 2 hours that now take you 30 minutes because I got IT to help you, you know, when you do those, that is because we are getting the data on this particular set of information, which tells us how we're doing with those customers, which directly relates to the mission that we're on. Connect those dots. And then they can, oh, what I do actually matters. And that's about retaining, right? That's about retention. We've had several people say, well, what about retention? Connect the dots. That is a big part of retention. And I got to go. Thank you.
Right. We will move forward here. I will continue with our presentation. Tell me, hopefully my screen is sharing. Did it go? There we go. Everybody see that? Jim's saying yes. Okay, very good. So what we want to talk about next is internal interviews. And here, when we're talking about this, it's not quite a stay interview, but it is similar. And what we want to know is really from a marketing perspective. So why do people like working there? What are they proud of? And again, you want to target your very best employees. When you understand that, then you can build out messaging that goes both on your website, in your job ads, in the advertising that you're doing when you're talking about the position. When you're asking employees for referrals, you can say, this is what we're looking for, and these kinds of things. And so those internal interviews are how we pull message. We do this from an external perspective if we ever want to build a marketing campaign, but we'll do this from an internal perspective. And so the example I'll give is that we actually went out and did internal interviews. We figured out who the best employees were. We interviewed them, and then we actually built the full career. We built out the careers page, and we put in place videos of those employees saying why they liked working there, what the experience was like. And again, we're looking to attract the right employees with that. So we have more comments, but I'm going to move us forward with what other questions do people have, if any, about marketing on this? Sure.
So I posted it on here, and I think you could answer this, Mike. What do employers do when they get bad reviews on Glassdoor?
It's a tough one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even think you can respond. If I remember correctly, there's a couple challenges there, right? Like one, you have HR privacy, so you can't necessarily respond. What I would do is I would actually go the opposite direction and ask people who really liked working there, can you go give us a review? Because if you if you're looking at marketing and you get a bad review on Google, what you want to do is go out there and respond, say, hey, I'm really sorry you had this experience. Will you please email us and we'd like to make this right? Or provide some sort of context and hopefully kind of appeal to the idea that maybe we're better than this person said. Now, I don't think you can do that on Glassdoor. At least you probably know the answer. One, I don't know that the functionality is there, but two, I don't think you can go, well, I'm really sorry you had this experience working here, because you're now kind of like, that's a privacy thing, I would think. But what you can do is go out and market to your current employees, figure out who your best and most engaged employees are. Hey, would you mind going and give us a rating on Glassdoor and talk about why you like working here? Get into the same things that we would do on your careers page. Now, obviously, not everybody's going to do it, but the more people that can do that, and that theme will actually help build out your brand for potential employees. All right, other questions? Carla says, great idea for videos on the careers page. Thank you. Yeah, I like that one myself. It was not my idea. That one was Marilyn's.
I'd like to say one more thing is that all the things that we're talking about, the purpose, feeling appreciated, all these things, it translates into not only lower turnover, but also translates into employees taking care of their clients. And, the owners of our or the leaders of our company to constantly talk about that. If we take care of our employees, they will take care of their clients, and the rest is done.
All right, very good. I'm going to give you 4 things to get right. We went over them, and then we're going to jump out of here. It's 10:59, and I apologize, I didn't realize it. Brand signals. What are you telling your potential employees about what it's like to work there? Make sure you have a great careers page with videos that speak to your best employees and what they need. Connect your mission to the role when you're doing the job interviews, when you're doing the ads, and when you're giving them feedback. Then go in and do employees interviews to understand, what do you want to communicate about what's great to work there? What's important to your best employees, because it's likely important to people just like them. All right, here's a final slide of our presenters. We have Jim Bishop, Lisa Smith, the missing Marilyn Haywood Paige. And finally, myself, I'm not important. We'll go back to the important people here. We have a webinar coming up next month on how you can leverage marketing. We will also talk to you about, we're going to ask you to refer us. Is that if we do this again, I would like you to tell Joanne, it was Jamie Phillips says, wonderful webinar. I would like you, Jamie, if we do this again, would you please send 5 people our way? I'm kidding, maybe just 1. That would be wonderful. So thank you very much, everyone. We are at 10:59. You have a meeting in exactly 30 seconds. We're going to shut it down here. Have a wonderful week.